Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hi, I'm so good. I'm really excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be very freewheeling and fun.
Yes, I'm so excited and thank you for being here.
Yeah, my
So
pleasure.
Michael, he's an incredible author and writer, and you've been featured in like New York Times and other newspapers and magazines. And I want to tell everyone to please read Ishtar's Angel, his novella, and his memoir called The Joyful Pessimism. So first of all, I want to talk about your memoir. And the funny part about all of this is that I was listening to your lecture in the IIN because I'm studying to become a health coach. And I'm studying after coming out of a deep, deep existential crisis. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy is so cool. I want to talk to this guy. So amazing. And first of all, I resonate so much when you describe your existential crisis and you say, like, we're trying to win this game. Of the game of life, which is pointless, and then we hate ourselves for wanting to win this pointless game, but desperately wanting to win it regardless. And so I say here, like, and in this failed attempt, we fill the void. So I want you to tell us your story a little bit and how was your journey through life and how you fill the void in those moments.
Well, thank you so much. Topics are obviously dear to my heart, and I kind of joke that I'm a walking as existential crisis. So, fortunately, the crises have gotten a bit more mellow in my 40s than they were in my 20s and 30s. But these are topics that I care about a lot, and so the memoir is called Joyful Pessimism, and it's a straight ahead memoir, and then it's intertwined with this dystopian erotic novella called Ishtar's Angel, which takes place in 2033. So it's obviously fictional. I'm not a time traveler. But so I make it clear what's the memoir and what's the novella. But they're independent narratives, but they're thematically intertwined. So the memoir part, the subtitle is Joyful Pessimism, a memoir of sex, mental illness, and philosophy. And those things were very intertwined for me, especially in my 20s. I was just, like a lot of people, I didn't really know how to relate to for me, the opposite sex or whatever sex whoever is attracted to. For me, I'm hetero, so I didn't know how to relate to the opposite sex. I was felt very dorky, unsuccessful. I think probably some of that was just made up in my mind, because looking back, it wasn't like
Yeah.
I was totally celibate, but I think I just had this. I compared myself. My first manuscript, which I'm very glad did not get published because it was a mess, was called Rockstar Envy, and I
You
kind of compared,
mentioned, you
yeah, and I
mentioned it.
compared myself to these rock stars who, by this very superficial metric of like sex and success with women, were very successful, and I hated myself because it was this paradox where I both envied them, and I hated myself for envying them. So it was this double whammy where like I wanted their success, yet I knew that their success was totally superficial. Like
Exactly.
it was just like I knew that they probably weren't even that happy. I've read memoirs about how many rock stars have like committed suicide or died of overdoses. Like it's not like having that type of success guarantees that you're happy. Yet I couldn't stop wanting the success, and so it was this weird kind of internal conflict that was causing extra angst inside of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, what were the ways you filled the void at that moment,
Um,
if you had any?
yeah. I mean, I was. I think the phrase "sex addict" is overdone. It's overused. It's definitely questionable whether like that actually exists as a analogy to like actual substance addiction. But I think the word compulsive resonates with me.
Yeah.
So I was unfortunately involved in like being a pickup, like I was studying pickup artistry, which I really regret. I think it's super skeezy looking back on it. I've a bit. But so I was like involved. I was in New York. I was like going out and like trying to pick up women in bars with limited success, and mostly hanging around these other kind of dorky pickup artists, like trying to make something happen. And yeah, like first game, and I'm actually ashamed of that because I think that's super superficial. It objectifies women. It's certainly not how I would relate to things now. But it was just like I kind of just like Other people, like, they want to see how much they can fill their bank account. Other people are like obsessively looking at the weight scale. And I was, excuse me, was just like, I was kind of looking at bed notches, and I regret that. It objectified women, but that's where I was at. That was like my self-worth was tied to that.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned that you go to live to South America in Buenos Aires. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Right. So I spoke pretty damn good Spanish then. It's pretty rusty now, so I won't embarrass myself trying to revive it. But I studied Spanish consistently since grade school. I had traveled to Cuba. I'm really into Cuban salsa. I've been to Cuba also. So my Spanish was solid. I was just kind of in a bad place, like financially. I kind of was that classic case of like boomerang kid, where I went out and then kind of moved back in with my parents in my mid-20s, and was like, editing my father's writing, and that was kind of a complicated situation. I just didn't have that much going on, but this was the very start of that whole like digital nomad concept. And this was 2007. And I had a really good friend who had moved to San Telmo. And she was very much in the culture. She had she's really good Argentine Spanish. She had an Argentine boyfriend, all the things. And she was like, come down here, and it was like, I was doing that thing of like working at internet cafes and kind of living locally. I was in a rough place emotionally. So, no knock on Buenos Aires, but I was not having a good time, mainly for my own reasons. And I was kind of at the height of a depressive phase, and was like definitely strong suicidal ideation. I don't think I ever would have. I've been like had several periods of very strong suicidal ideation where like I just can't stop thinking about it. It's like all I'm thinking about. Several times in my life through bipolar. I don't think I ever would have actually done it, mainly in all cases because my parents have been really good to me. I love my parents. And that would just suck to do that to them, so like that was kind of, they kept me alive. I think had they not been around, had they been dead, I would have been dead. So, and it's not like they were calling me, and like, they didn't even know. I kept it from them. Like they had no idea really, but I was just imagining how devastated they would be. So I reached like a really, really low point. I was in this like 4-story walk up in San Telmo. You know how that neighborhood looks. It's like cracked sidewalks. It's kind of like perfect for, you would imagine like, just that look of some dramatic ending to a novel, and I was just staring for hours at the sidewalk below. And fortunately, I don't think I was going to do it, but it's really all I could think about. And finally, as I tell in the story, one of my freelance clients was a guy called Martin Strell, and he was a famous marathon swimmer. Like he would swim. His thing was he would swim all the big rivers in the world, and he did the longest swim ever recorded, which was the entire Amazon in like 63 days. And he said something in an interview that just really hit me. He said, I'm either going to swim the Amazon or die trying. And that just hit me. It was like, wow, that guy has a goal that is so important to him that he would sacrifice himself a goal. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to like swim the Amazon. I'm not going to try to do something where I'm likely to die, but what could I do to like knock myself out of this rut? And I had been told by a doctor that I should really quit anything because of my bipolar. I should quit anything that like kind of messed up blood sugar levels. So that like included obviously sugar, like refined sugar, but also coffee and alcohol. And I was living on those things. I was like, Malbec, like really good wine, like good café con leche. What are those alfaflores or alfajores? So I was like living off coffee, sugar, and wine. So I just was like, all right, you know what? I'm at the end of my line. I got to try something. I'm just going to try a year without refined sugar, coffee, or alcohol. And I went cold turkey. It sucked. The sugar was the hardest one. Like it's all I could think about was sugar. And I felt better in like 2 weeks. And I'm not certain, like I'm sure that the the subs, like the coffee, the sugar, I'm sure that helped it. Honestly, I think that what helped just as much as those things was just like this or challenge, where it's like, all right, I'm going to fucking do this.
Yeah, like
I
taking
think that
charge,
helped a lot. Yeah.
taking
Taking
charge
charge. Like,
of
exactly.
something. Exactly.
Yeah.
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 I love your story.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so now I want to go in a little bit into the Ishtar's Angel novella. And first of all, I love your novella. It's incredible. And you bring up,
Thank you.
because you bring up so many like real current dark issues, like with a perfect splash of humor,
Yeah. Thank you. That means a lot to me. That writing is very dear to my heart. So, and it's a little bit hard to get into. So if somebody gets into it, it really means a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah, and I resonated a lot with all of your topics. So the first one I want to go into is artificial intelligence, because that's the revolution that's happening right now in the world. And artificial is the word that I see and read everywhere. Even
right.
the food we eat, because everything
right.
is processed. We have humanity has all sorts of cancers arising. The health system prescribing medicines constantly, creating artificial lifespans. And on top of everything, you mentioned like how starving artists can't survive, and the machines and technologies are still being well fed with energy, electricity, computing power, and oodles of Bitcoin. So would you say that we are officially experiencing the decline of humankind?
I have to say yes. I know there's a range of opinions on this. None of us really know what the future holds. So I certainly don't claim that I have a crystal ball and I know. And who knows, it could turn, there's people who think that we're on the verge of a utopia and that AI is going to, solve cancer and solve all illness and like create energy abundance and food abundance. That's very possible. It's possible. We don't rule it out. That's my gut tells me that's not where it's at. And I'm biased. I kind of am philosophically pessimistic as just, that's kind of my bent. But I don't, you just read today a post that I did.
Yes.
Playing with Claude AI, which just came out a month ago. So this is like version, 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never been that impressed with ChatGPT. I mean, I was impressed insofar as like, wow, a computer can write, but the writing didn't do much for me. But Claude is a much better writer.
Yeah,
and
I
like
was
it's actually, it's doing stuff.
Impressed.
It actually beat me at my own game because I gave it. I mean, you can upload large documents and have it analyze and like try to write in the voice of the document. So I uploaded my whole book, my memoir and my novella. And I asked it to write the next chapter. Not that I would actually, pass off AI writing as my own, but I was just curious, like, what is it going to come up with?
Yeah.
And it really sucked. Like, it was awful. Like, I would never, ever, it wasn't even in the ballpark. But I then gave it an assignment. I said, okay, analyze my novella, Ishtar's Angel, and you are Camille Paglia, who's a cultural critic. She's very bombastic. She has a very, very over-the-top writing, her writing style. It's very distinctive, her writing style. And I said, you're Camille Paglia, write a 300-word essay analyzing Ishtar's Angel. And like, I have to say, it nailed it. It really nailed, like it got her voice. I read her a lot. I mean, she might disagree that it's exactly her, but as someone who likes her writing a lot, I have to say that it really got her voice, that kind of over the top bombastic voice. It really understood the major themes of my work. And I'm talking like in a minute. This is I uploaded like 200 pages of my novella. That would take, an average reader 5-6 hours to read that. And they might not have the reading comprehension. And like this thing read it in a minute and clearly understood my work, and then understood Camille Paglia's writing voice, and then put the two together and wrote a thing that actually is pretty lively. Like it was the first time that I saw AI create writing that I would call good writing. And I'm picky. And was it great writing? No, but it was good writing.
And same in in the other post where you say like write a post vulnerable with the word vulnerability, because you touched that button to say like, oh, maybe to see if the machine like actually can know how to write in a vulnerable tone of voice.
Right.
And it literally got your vibe as a writer.
It got my vibe. That's a great way to put it. I think I'm still beating it as a writer.
Yes,
but it got my vibe. And it had a couple turns of phrases that I thought were really good. And so it's like, every year they're like, well, AI can't do this. AI can't do that. It used to be like AI could never beat a chess person, and then it did. And it was like, well, okay, it can beat chess, but it'll never beat anyone at Go. And then, it beat like the world champion at Go, which is much more complicated than chess. And then, it's like, oh, well, AI could never, fool someone to think it's human. And now it's like, there's all these scams where it's creating voice recognition and like fooling people for scams. So it's like, and so my version of that was like, well, AI will never like produce writing that I thought was good. And it kind of just did. I mean, it was only phrases. It wasn't the whole thing. So I mean, my novella is really my way of dealing emotionally and psychologically with this reality that we might be taken over. I saw a tweet somewhere. It was like, who would have guessed that it would be the robots writing poetry and the humans digging ditches? Like I think all these, socialists for 100 years before there even were robots were like, one day machines are going to dig the ditches and we're going to like sit around and write poetry. Well, like surprise, surprise, 2023, all the intellectual careers are on the chopping block. Like, or not intellectual, but like white collar careers,
like lawyers,
like a lot of lawyering is now going to be done by AI, like medical diagnosis, copywriting, like less creative type writing, like a lot of that stuff. And it really, and art. I mean, it's, I think there's artists. I really feel for graphic visual artists because I think the visual art output is better than the writing output right now. I mean, that I'm sure the writing will catch up soon, but like it can create some really stunning images. And like, I would like, if I had spent 30 years learning to draw or learning to paint or create photographs and then see it just doing that, I would feel like shit. And I'm kind of feeling like shit around, the writing part. So my novella is really what I try to do in my writing is have compassion for people and for myself, and really be like, look, we're in a hard time here. Like, this is actually really scary. And we're having a lot of feelings about it. And here is, maybe it will feel good to like experience a fellow narrator who is going through these same emotions.
Exactly. And me as a graphic designer that I'm like really into also all these topics, I like what I think it's like you're either in it or you're out. So I'm utilizing all these tools for my work. And so like my next question is, in your novella, you mentioned, like, for example, the no copyright laws apply to AI because of how they make slight changes to the work, how the information and data is available, like which meaning there's no privacy, the loss of meaning, the voice, the synthesis, and the fake versions of everything. So how are you dealing with this now, or how have you ever thought how you will deal with this in the near future?
Right. So one of the plot points one of the background factors, I should say, in the fiction is that this narrator, Damon Derriere, who's basically, I mean, I'm not keeping it a secret or a surprise. He basically is like a future projection of myself. So the memoir goes from like age 18 to pretty close to now, like in my 40s, I'm 6. And then the novella is kind of a future projection into this dystopian future in 10 years. And it's basically like a future of me, although I use a different name for the character. And so this character is in a situation where basically the AIs have actually aped his writing voice really well, not just like okay, but like fantastic. And in fact, like main themes and ideas are even deeper and better. And then, the AIs, of course, can produce like 24/7, 365 content with no break. And then they can create like virtual avatars, and they've broken into, like, imagine when AIs get a hold of like our private emails and like our browsing web searching history, like porn viewing history, like they'll be able to like create so much scandal around us and like so much intrigue that we wouldn't necessarily do ourselves. And so that basically the situation is like these AIs have taken Damon Derriere, and that's the name of the narrator, and like created a version of him that is more compelling, and like all the money is flowing to these AIs instead
and more efficient in the way it works. It doesn't need to rest. It produces.
It just works. It doesn't need to rest. It doesn't have existential crises that
exactly
block it from writing for a year, and yeah, I mean, that's all possible. I mean, there are some issues. I mean, copyright, the AI stuff, there's a lawsuit winding its way in the courts right now. I think a bunch of artists are suing OpenAI and other companies for feeding their art into the algorithm. So I don't know how that will turn out. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding of copyright law is that if it's not actually reproducing the actual thing that you did, it's not a copyright infringement. Yeah. So like I can write in the style of J.K. Rowling or Stephen King or whoever, and nobody can copyright a style. And I don't think an artist, an artist can copyright a style. So they're taking this art and writing, and they're learning to produce something in the style of such and such artist. But you can't really copyright a style. Exactly. Now, what you can have control over is there's something called, I think it's called likeness rights. So like I couldn't create a virtual avatar of Kim Kardashian and say like, hey everyone, this is Kim Kardashian, this is VR Kim Kardashian, go buy my book. So there's likeness rights where I think that may come into play more, where like these VR avatars are prevented from imitating actual humans because of likeness rights. But still, I mean, those are hard to enforce. There's like, they might just, also a lot of these things might be coming out of, you don't even know where they're being created. Like they might not actually be humans creating them. So like you can't sue an AI. So you just, it's going to get weird. I mean, this is the one prediction I'm really confident of. Am I totally confident that we're going to live in this dystopia? No, I mean, that's my best guess. I'm not confident, but here's what I am confident of. It's going to be fucking weird. Like, like we're heading into a era of maximum weirdness. Like that, I am absolutely sure of.
Yeah. And the limit, like between the things now, like is questioned. You know what I mean? Because it's like slight changes where you don't know where the law applies or not. It's like it's going to be weird.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be weird. And it's going to be weird. Like this is something I just did this with my mom, and this is something everyone should do, is you should, with your people, your family, you should set up, they have a term for it now, an AI safe word. So if my mom gets a call from someone who sounds like me and I'm on a trip and I'm like, hey mom, I just lost my wallet. I need, $10,000 wired to this bank account or whatever. My mom now knows to ask, okay, what's the magic word? And we have a magic word set up. And like, cause this has already happened. This isn't theoretical. Like people have been scammed with fake voices now. All they need is like a minute or less of your voice and they can recreate your voice pretty well. And I mean, we're talking here on Zoom. We've never met in person. I think that probably like VR imitations of not VR, like two-dimensional video imitations of video likenesses are probably only 6 months to a year off. I mean, they probably already exist in some lab somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to get weird because it's like also, like whether these things are conscious or not is a huge debate. And we don't even really know what consciousness is. And it's not well defined. And technically speaking, we don't actually know that anyone else is conscious. Like, I don't know that you're conscious. You don't know that we assume we are, but we don't have like a window into each other's consciousness. So we don't know the same about we don't know if these programs are going to be conscious or not. But what we know for sure is that they're going to be able to imitate conscious beings or humans or who, companions well enough that we'll be like, we're going to fall in love with them, like the movie Her. And the crazy thing is, we'll fall in love with them, and you would hope that somebody you fall in love with, a human, has your best interest at heart, and the love is based on mutual support and mutual benefit. That may not be true with the AIs that we fall in love with. Like if some corporation makes us fall in love with its AI, most likely it's going to start manipulating us to like buy the products of that corporation.
Exactly.
I really think like we're going to see, I think the way AIs are going to take over is not through like Terminator with guns, like shooting us. I think it's going to be through like seducing us.
Yes. Okay. I want to go into that topic now. I want to say that like, I was amazed when you start talking about how in the part you say like how men exercised power over women, like since the beginning of civilization. And when you mention like the sexual advantage over men as women was devaluated, like you talk about sex in a woman and the power of seduction, and also talking about it like in an economic point of view, as if it could have been a marketplace, but we women were put down and controlled by men when they knew and discovered this power that we had, right?
Right. Yeah. So
tell me.
No, keep going. Yeah.
That also you mentioned, and why Demon Derriere goes to the bordel to end his life with a harlot, because that the real flesh and bone and meat of a woman will never be able to be replaced by robots.
Right. Exactly. So one of the concepts I explore is this idea that there's two types of really elemental types of force or power in human life, and really I would say throughout nature, and that is violence and sex.
Yes.
And these are both ways that you can get people to do things that you might want them to do. So you can force them, with threats or violence, and you can seduce them to do something that you would want to do. And, I think historically, in times before there were militaries and weapons, equalized power, men have one advantage in this realm, is that they're on average taller, on average have higher body, upper body strength on average, right? There's female MMA fighters who could whoop my ass, it's obviously it's a bell curve. In the early days, I think that my theory, and this is kind of a pet theory, I couldn't like back this up with archaeology, but my theory is that the origin of patriarchy is that in the early days, there was men had an advantage in an area that really like had power back then, which was physical force, right? Like these days, physical force isn't that much of an advantage because we have machines, and like a woman with a gun is the same as a man with a gun, and a woman with a ditch digger machine is the same as a man with a ditch digging machine. So, but back then, before those machines existed, there really was an advantage in being taller and stronger, and so I think men kind of used that advantage to create like this sexual cartel where they were in charge. And the other form of force, which I think is actually more powerful, is seduction. And women are much more powerful in this. Like if you look at, for example, you look at men's magazines and women's magazines. What do in men's magazines look at? They look at women. They look at Playboy, Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. And then you take women's magazines. What do women look at? They look at women too. Like women are beautiful. Everybody loves women. And so women have this like incredible seductive power. And my theory is that, early on, that seductive power was controlled. Like men saw that this was powerful and they wanted to keep the power for themselves. And they had this advantage in physical force. Yeah.
And that's why they created monogamy. That's why they created monogamy, also to reduce this power or to cancel this power of women.
Yes. The origins of monogamy, I believe, and I think there is some anthropological literature that could back this up. Again, these are more like pet theories. I'm not claiming that these are like rigorous, airtight academic theories, but basically this is something that if you're involved in polyamory at all, I don't know where you're at in them, but I've always been polyamorous for most of my adult life. And one thing you learn really quick in polyamory is that the women call the shots. Like a lot of guys, they're like in a monogamous relationship, and they're like, the couple is like talking about a hetero couple here, and like they're talking about maybe opening their relationship, and the guy has all these fantasies of like, oh my god, I'm gonna like get laid and have like all these babes and have, and then what happens, and this is super predictable. It's happened to me. I've seen it happen many times. Is that the couple opens up, the woman is getting dates like every night. She has like, she's on Tinder. She's getting 1,000 matches on Tinder. She can like go and fuck whoever she wants, if it's in the rules of their polyamory. And then the guy's like, wow, I'm just home alone because my woman's like out getting fucked. And so that I think like on an open, just say dating market, I'm putting that term in quotes because it's a bit reductive, but if you look through it that lens, on a kind of open dating market, women have much more market value. Like, men can barely get any matches on Tinder, whereas women have the opposite problem. They have to weed out the matches. And so I really think that monogamy, like if we had an open dating market, there would basically be like these women would be having like all these lovers, and then like there would be kind of this class of men who like couldn't even get laid. And so the men didn't want that situation. So they created monogamy, where it's like every man gets a woman, even though in the natural order of things, I think there's a lot of men out there who just wouldn't get a woman. Like they just wouldn't. Whereas almost any woman can get a man. So I think the men created monogamy basically to kind of like, it's almost like socialism. It's like sexual socialism for men.
Yes.
Does that resonate? Do I sound crazy? I mean, does that resonate for you at all?
I resonate completely with everything you're saying, even because I'm in an open relationship and I deal with all this like how do you say, like, how the woman act along men, how men, the different energies, what is like produced from both sides, and how this changed through history also, as like fathers, when they had a daughter, they had to keep her as a virgin because if not, you were a whore.
Right.
But that was only a move for power.
Yes, exactly. I think the virgin whore dichotomy is like the central core idea of patriarchy. Like not the only one, but it's like right at the core.
Exactly.
Because basically it's a way to control women, where and I write about this in my thing, is that you have like these older men in patriarchy, let's say like 5,000 years ago, and it's still to some degree continues today, but let's say 5,000 years ago, you have like these older men, and they want to use their daughters' sexual purity, quote unquote, as like a bargaining chip. Like they like, oh look, we have this pure virgin daughter, we're gonna like bargain her off to another family. In my book, I say like marriage is the original sex trafficking. Exactly. I mean, it's literally true. Like with like child marriages, like girls getting married off at like age 13. I mean, that's actually fits the definition of sex trafficking.
Yeah.
So they want keep their daughters pure. So the daughter is a virgin, but then they're guys and they want to fuck, young fertile women. So they kind of create this class of whores, quote unquote, who they can kind of use sexually, and these are like the fallen women, and it's like keep our daughters away from them. We're gonna go hire them, but like we don't want our daughters. It's like the cliche. I know a bunch of strippers, and I've talked to them about their work, and they always say that these guys come in and they're like, oh, I would never. They're kind of like, oh man, like something must have gone wrong in your life, for you to be a stripper. It's like, dude, you're in the fucking strip club. Like it takes two to tango. And then they're like, did something like, I would never want my daughter to be a stripper, but they're going to hire a stripper. It's like, it's so fucked up.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, if you're a woman and you're intelligent, like it won't take us long to realize and understand the value around sex. And if we assume like work is being compensated for time, like and for time spent providing a service, like what would stop us from providing a service through sex? But many, many women cannot even think of doing such or anything related because of the stigma or what people would say.
Right.
When in reality, it's just words and conditioning from our society.
Right. No, exactly. And I'm not telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do in their life, but like so the novella takes off on this idea. It really started with this idea. I was thinking, okay, my writing job is probably gone in a couple of years. Like I have no fucking clue what I'm going to do for income, but hopefully I'll have some savings or I'll figure something out. But like I was thinking, okay, who's going to keep their jobs? And I was really thinking, I think like in-person sex workers will keep their jobs.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I think like more like porn performers, cam girls might actually have competition with VR avatars and things.
Yeah.
But anybody where it's in person, where you're a stripper, a dominatrix, massage, escort, where there's like flesh and blood, I think that's the idea is like the machines are already overtaking like men's natural advantage. The only advantage men ever had in history was just physical body strength on average. That's the only advantage men have ever had. And like maybe a proclivity towards more like physical aggressiveness with testosterone.
Yeah.
Those things like robots are going to, or can take those over. I mean, if they wanted to arm drones and robot dogs, they could already do that. It's only like international conventions that are preventing that. Whereas like sex robots that would overtake women's natural advantage and sexiness, ones that are even close are like probably a decade away or more. And
there
like,
will
even
be
then,
a market for that, but I don't think it will never be able to replace fully.
Right. I don't think that. I think you can replace soldiers with robot soldiers. I do not think that anytime soon, like in our lifetimes, you would be able to replace like a in-person stripper or an in-person escort with a robot. I mean, there will be like a niche market for that, but like I think there will always be a demand for in-person sex workers. Most sex workers are women. So my novella imagines this future where like all of humanity is declining, but relatively speaking, like the female sex workers are kind of
prevailing,
getting more of the income that humans have remaining compared to everyone else. So it's like this female worker owned sex collectives, where they're the ones in charge. They're like these warlord, like kind of these warlord societies, but they're warlordettes. So that was the impetus of the novella. And one of the rants that the characters go on is this idea that I really honestly think that this whole virgin whore dichotomy got instituted to prevent women from profiting from something they have that's really valuable. And in heterosexual marriage, there's this one option where a woman can marry like a wealthy man and bargain kind of her beauty and sexuality for the man's wealth. Like that's kind of one option, but the patriarchy just cut off every other option and said, oh, if you try to do it more directly or just do it on a more casual scale that doesn't involve marriage, now you're a slut. You're a whore. You're a slut. That's bad. You shouldn't do that. And I honestly think the main reason that judgment got put in place was basically to keep women from profiting from themselves.
Exactly. And accumulating wealth through so much time, because it would have surpassed men's wealth for like a lot.
I believe so. I think that, I mean, I don't know if this will actually happen or not, but in my novella, I imagine a future where that happens.
Yes. So now, my last question is that in your writing, you also portray very clearly how machines accelerate production exponentially with no need of rest, and how this creates more waste in cities that then they're not even able to handle. And as more products are available so quickly, there's how I like to say, there's more ways to fill the void because there are more symptoms that arise after all these stimuli. So what's your personal experience with this right now about filling the void, even if it's healthy or unhealthy, and how are you coping? Or better, like, what's your way to fill the void now?
Right. So, I mean, first of all, I think that a void is, there's some void that's inherent to being human, because we are maybe other species have this. I don't think so. Not, at least not as pronounced as humans. We're the species that really wonders about the universe.
Yes.
Like where did the stars come from? What's the sun? Where did the sun come from? Why this? Why that? Where did this come from? Little kids, where did I come from? Where do humans come from?
Why
Where
are
do
we
babies come
here?
from? Why are we here? Like we have this void of like where our brains and our curiosity is like much bigger than our ability to answer things. And so we have this void, and then we fill it in different ways, as your work and your podcast is about. And as I'm sure you talk about, it can be filled in ways that are relatively healthy or unhealthy. And I would say, okay, how do you judge whether something is healthy or not? I think the word sustainable makes a lot of sense there.
Good point.
If you are stuffing yourself with junk food, that's not sustainable because you're going to get sick and it won't go on. If you're fulfilling it, gambling, it's not sustainable because you're going to lose all your money. And you can go, so you can look at a bunch of ways of filling the void that are not sustainable. Whereas for me, I've gotten to the point where, writing, my writing is how I keep myself sane. Like I used to like live the crazy and then like try to put it into my writing, but the cray was so crazy that my writing was really unfocused. And I've just like, I got to the saturation point of that. I got to the point of like, all right, I'm good on the crazy in my life. I need to like have a more like slightly more boring, predictable life. But I've lived enough crazy that fortunately, the one good thing about being a writer is that like any crazy fucked up thing that happens in your life is like great material for writing.
Exactly.
So I got a lot of good material and with my mental illness journey. And now I try to keep a fairly, I won't say boring, but like relatively stable life. I don't go out as much. I have a girlfriend. We stay at home a lot. I like have a day job, but these things that are kind of stabilizing forces.
Yes. I like how you call it. Stabilizing forces.
Yeah, stabilizing forces. But then because I have that stability in the external world, and I can really channel the cray into my writing, because you don't want your writing to be stable and boring. Like you want the writing. it has to have structure. It has to have integrity to it. But within that structure, you want it to really go into really dark and crazy places. So yeah, for me, it's kind of a cliche, but like my art, my writing fills the void. And I think to your point of like, there's going to be more distractions. I think that's something to really look at because, we already 10 years or so into the social media age.
Yes.
We already kind of understand that, or maybe 15 years, I guess now, that we're over distracted. There's too many things vying for our attention. And like, this is about to go, like, we haven't seen anything yet.
No.
Like when they have like photorealistic, like VR AI avatars, like imagine your ultimate like fantasy lover that is like, just like, and they've read all your emails and they know your web.
They know you better
browser.
Than yourself, basically.
They know you better than yourself, like they know you better than a therapist would know you. Like, they're going to tailor shit that is going to be so irresistible that, I don't want to judge. I think a lot of people will just find that more compelling than their day-to-day life. And I don't want to judge that because honestly, a lot of day-to-day life is really boring and sucks. Exactly. So like if people find something that's compelling to them, I certainly don't want to judge that. But what I do want to presence is like, it's probably a good idea to find things that keep you grounded and centered in the here
in the flesh.
And now, because like if you don't have those things, you are going to just get like sucked into this world, and also like not for manipulative purposes, like where you're just becoming like the tool of some ideology or some corporation or some government or something,
It's scary, but it's a reality we're getting into.
So I'm just trying to come to terms with it in my writing. I am trying to hopefully create something where people who are worried in the same way, and I won't say I'm like freaking out, because I've sort of done enough work where 99.99999% of species that have ever existed are extinct. We all die. No species is going to last forever. So there has to be some surrender to death.
Exactly.
My father was 92. He died a month ago. It was actually the first time like someone close to me had died. So like you learn, like death is part of existence. Like every molecule that we have was like part, or I don't know about every molecule, but a lot of molecules were like part of some other organism that died before. So the circle of, so I'm not saying I'm like freaking out, but I'm definitely having pretty strong feels about it. And so I'm trying to process those feels in my writing.
Yeah. And you do it amazing. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you
so much.
One question for you is,
yes.
How did you get interested? I know a bit about your history with like getting interested in this idea of like filling a void. How did you get interested specifically in all these questions about like AI and how that relates to it? What's your journey around that?
Basically because I'm a graphic designer and I design, that's my daily job. And basically I started getting into AI because I was like, it's really making my job easier because I'm spending less time to do everything that before, like editing a video took me like 2 days. And right now with like one button, it's done in like seconds, So basically I started like tripping with all these things and I started like researching and I use these programs in my daily life. But that's how I got into AI. And I'm like, all these things that are coming up, like what will the world turn into, And I come from a history of addictions of every kind. And so I'm like a very addictive person. So I get like stuck with these things where I feel the void constantly. And that's how I, in your writing, you connect every spot, every dot of all these things. So I was like, this is incredible.
Wow. And do you think from the graphic designer perspective, do you have some of the similar fears of like, oh my gosh, I might not have a job in a couple of years? Like where do you turn out on that?
I think graphic design is going to die completely. I know I'm not going to work as a graphic designer anymore. That's why I also I'm studying to be a health coach because that's my passion, even because of my history. And I know that this is a necessity and it will be forever, like the necessity of health and to guide people to a better and healthy, lifestyle because of all these things that are arising as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think things like health coaching is going to be like, people are not going to want to talk to robots. I mean, some will, but like mostly they're going to want to talk to humans for health coaching and like things like therapy. I actually think it's probably a good time to be becoming a therapist because I think humans will always want to talk to other humans, like a massage therapist, holistic things. I think those are going to be more resistant. Do you have another minute? I'm curious.
Yes, of course.
Your take on the graph. Okay. So on this idea of, that graphic design may end as a profession. Is it possible? And here I'm being surprised, like I'm actually surprisingly having an optimistic thought or at least entertaining one. So let's say we have a certain standard of visual of what we expect from our visual experiences, our movies, our magazines and such. And let's say that let's just call that standard X, even though obviously it can't be quantified, but let's just say that's X, that standard is X. Now you as a skilled graphic designer, you could produce X in a week, and now you can produce X in a day. So maybe that means that you can produce like 5X in a week. And so maybe it's just like I'm just entertaining this thought. Maybe the amount of graphic designers won't go down. It's just that the output that we come to expect from graphic designers will be so much higher before, because now everybody's like multiplying their hours by the increased productivity. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think that's a possibility, and it will be. And what I also think is that maybe you don't need the skill of the graphic designer in terms of like knowing how to use the programs to edit or to do the designs, but you will still need the creative mind, because you need to like formulate the prompts and the things also for the machines to produce. So
right.
the creative mind in the human, I think that will be in need, but not the skill.
Right.
That's what's going to be replaced.
I think that's an Yeah, I think that is the one thing that I have hope for around there with humans sticking around, is that like we don't actually know what human creativity is. Exactly. Like we don't know. Nobody knows. Where does an idea for a novel come from? Where does the idea from the painting? Like we just don't know. There's no good theory. I mean, maybe there's theories, but like nobody has a definitive answer. And so it's hard to say, like, will computer programs be able to create this thing that we don't even know what the hell it is or where it comes from? I'm not saying it's like some mysterious divine thing. I'm, basically an atheist, but like there's some kind of processing happening in our brains. We don't know what's going on. We just don't. And so it may be a while before.
Like that chemistry in the brain, I think it's unique. It won't be replaced by a machine.
I think I would say, I think I have a sense it may be, but I think that may take longer than we think. But that said, like I have to say, the Claude.ai thing, like I don't think the overall thing was very creative, but it definitely had some creative phrases where like that was not copying me. It was not copying me. It got my vibe, as you put it, and then it created some actually really good phrases based on that vibe.
Exactly.
So that is, I have to say, like that is creativity. It's not super extensive creativity, but it is creativity.
It is creativity to this extent. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad that you're thinking about these things. I think what I think people should be doing is exactly what you're doing, is kind of diversifying. Like, okay, if my career got replaced, what else might I do? Like, and I think that's what you're doing. I think that's really smart. So
yes, thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, so good. Thanks for having me on.
So much.
I hope what I've said made some sense.
Yes, of course. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.